dreams come true. You need it, they stock it. Happy dog, she's got it.
You won't believe the things we've got on view.
Delicious surprises
before your very eyes. A scratch, a smile, a shake, a shine, a shoe.
When you go out shopping, why don't you just pop in? More buttons, the shop for me and you.
Wolfenstein Youngblood is a fairly decent shooter. In some ways, I found it more immediately enjoyable than Wolfenstein 2, the New Colossus, which drags the pace a little in the beginning. Takes a while to get truly going. This is quicker to get into the action, and the co-op lends a little something extra, a little bit of interest, a little novelty factor to the experience. However, once that novelty wears off on a longer-term basis, and when I say longer-term, I'm talking maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours into the experience, the interest drops off fairly quickly, and what you're left with is a shallower feeling game, a more repetitive game, and something that confirms the worries that Fallout 76 kicked off, and that's that the publisher, Bethesda, has well and truly been bitten by the live service bug. That idea of games existing more as perpetual experiences rather than well-paced comprehensive productions. As we've seen, most live services skimp a little on narrative direction, on rewarding, surprising gameplay, and at their worst, a live service will skimp a lot on those things in order to be led more by microtransactions and an experience that banks on compulsion, on repetitiveness, on habit, more than compelling reasons to get into the game for the story or to get to its climaxes and crescendos. To its credit, Youngblood is not quite as exploitative and not quite as threadbare as some of the cynically produced live service games from AAA publishers this year. It's fine. While I was playing it for that first hour, I thought to myself, this is pretty good so far. I somewhat like the structure of striking out from the home base, from the Resistance headquarters, into different sectors of New Paris, going out to the same areas to perform different missions before returning home. It's hard to not be satisfied when shooting scores of Nazis, although there is an element to the combat here that offsets some of that fun, which we'll get to in a moment when we stop being positive. We're doing the nice bits at the moment, we're being nice. Now, despite my recently voiced criticism of social networking being shoveled into games as yet another way of publishers trying to con money out of people, I'm not against decent multiplayer, I'm not against decent co-op, and the co-op here is pretty decent. There's some of that tired, arbitrary feeling co-op guff where you have to open a door but you've got to wait for your partner to come and help you open it. That was old-fashioned over 10 years ago, and we can do without it in our co-op experiences today. But I do like how co-op players interact during combat. You get these little emotes, but they're not just cosmetic emotes. They have a tangible effect on the gameplay and actually confer bonuses to the players. You can only have one at a time, but they can do things such as restore armor, restore health. Some of the unlockable ones will let you revive your teammate from a distance, or even boost your damage output. There's some light RPGing going on there, and it's clear that it is in there to emphasize that idea of a live service. But leveling up, getting skill points, unlocking abilities, that's always going to be fun on some level. The best element of Youngblood, though, the star of the show, is, well, it is the stars of the show. Players take on the roles of Soph and Jess Blazkowicz, the daughters of the famous BJ, and they're just a delight, if I'm being honest. They're just lovely. They are endearingly dorky, really silly. They have these fun interactions with each other. The way they talk to each other feels very much like twin sisters, like siblings, sharing in jokes, messing about together, sometimes giving each other a little bit of crap, but with some real love behind it, and it's really believable. In order to mask loading in an elevator, they have little security cams showing the two sisters waiting as the elevator ascends or descends, and it's mostly them dancing in the nerdiest way possible to a vague 80s beat, and it charms me every single time. They've got this upfront southern down-to-earthiness that they clearly inherited from Blazkowicz, but with a little more naivety to them, since they're, you know, they're younger, they're his daughters, and they just come across as really affable and endearing the whole way through. I've loved playing as them. They're probably my favourite video game protagonists in years, at least when it comes to larger scale games from AAA companies. But Wolfenstein Youngblood does go out of its way in many areas to fulfill that live service remit, to jump aboard that gravy train that far too many games have been jumping aboard, especially this year and last year. Everything's got to be a service now. We've got to have these perpetual experiences that really aren't as in-depth and comprehensive as a full-fledged game with a beginning and a middle and an end, and come up with desperate ways to just keep you hooked, to keep you trapped in a gameplay loop so that you'll just keep firing up the game and playing, as I said earlier, out of habit more than a genuine desire to see the end through. This manifests in some of the mission structure. As I say, you strike out from a headquarters into various sectors of the city, and there are emergent missions that pop up, and they're no more compelling than go here, press a button. Go there, press a button. And they pop up over and over again. And some of the main missions feel a little bit like that as well, just more habitual than led by a story or a sense of pacing and good direction. There are microtransactions, as I've said. Let's talk about those. A lot of it is cosmetic. It's just cosmetic, and I've talked about the psychological ways in which that argument doesn't hold up. The it's cosmetic excuse doesn't really hold water when you consider how social pressure, how aesthetic displays are manipulated by game companies for cash, especially when co-op is here. What a surprise that we've got some microtransactions to buy certain cosmetics or speed up the process of getting other cosmetics, when there is an online player that you could interact with to show those looks off. That's social manipulation to make money, and it's cynical, blah, 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 blah. There are also, because why wouldn't there be, there are also boosters! Yahoo! Wahey! Who doesn't love a good booster? XP boosters, ammo boosters, what other ones are there? Lots of I forgot all the boosters, but there are XP ones, things that just speed up the process of progression and can make the game a little easier. They do offer gameplay advantages, and they can be bought with the premium currency, depending on what platform you're on. I saw a report that the PC microtransactions are a little more limited, whereas I'm playing on PS4, and the game's premium currency, these gold bars, can be used to purchase these boosters and speed up the process of getting certain things, and can only be used for certain items. Now, depending on your tolerance for boosters, Youngblood does not explicitly have full-on direct pay-to-win elements. And when I say that, I mean you can't just dump money into the game to get better guns. Gun upgrades use only the free in-game currency, which in many microtransaction-fueled experiences I often call the bollocks currency. It's a little less bollocks here than it is in some of these microtransaction-fueled games, in that the silver coins, which is the stuff you can only earn in-game, they can be found liberally throughout the level, and only they can be used when it comes to actually upgrading your gear. Although, saying that, I just remembered there is an XP booster. So I just say that out of habit. It's not an XP booster, there is a silver coin booster that speeds up the process of picking up those little pennies. Now, microtransactions aside, I will also just say I'm a little bit annoyed that they were there and I didn't know beforehand. I think this is why I think there should be massive warning labels, not just a little note box somewhere on the store page that notes the in-app purchases. One of the screenshots on the store screen should just be a giant Surgeon's General style warning, because I'd like it to look like that, to let me know before I buy like a special edition of a game, because that's one of my little rules I have for myself. I might be inclined to get a deluxe edition, a special edition, basically a more incrementally expensive edition of a game, if, and only if, there aren't microtransactions and loot boxes inside. If you're gonna try and get more money out of me, don't try and get more money out of me in every single opportunity, and I might be inclined to give you a little extra. And I thought, well, Doom and Wolfenstein and most Bethesda games that were not Fallout 76 have done pretty right by me in terms of not having microtransactions in them, in terms of earning enough trust for me to buy a deluxe edition. So, a little bit too trusting and sight unseen, I got the deluxe edition. It comes with skins, and I think the emote I'm using was part of it as well. So I got that and only learned afterwards that there were microtransactions in the game. More fool me. But hey ho, lesson learned, I was still trusting games that were not explicitly made by Bethesda, but ones that are merely published by them now no longer have my trust either. So those are the microtransactions. It's a shame. I wish I'd known beforehand. I feel a little bit duped, but you know, ultimately it was a trap I fell into myself. You might have noticed, we'll get to this bit, the enemies are bullet sponges, which doesn't feel all that Doomy or Wolfenstein-y. I mean, obviously there are tougher enemies that take some beatings, but here, it's closer to Borderlands, or less encouragingly closer to Anthem, which again seems to be a hallmark of these live service games. Certainly looter-shooters. We couldn't call this a looter-shooter, but it's got that same emphasis on enemy health. They have these shields protecting their health bars that require different guns to puncture, and I don't want to think about that when I'm playing a balls-to-the-wall action game like this. I don't want to be thinking about, am I using the right gun? But even without that, puncturing shields on bullet-spongy enemies just doesn't feel as immediately gratifying as previous games in the series. I could be remembering incorrectly, but I don't remember General Mooks feeling quite as bullet-absorbent as these hardy Nazis. And that contributes to this game feeling not quite as satisfying as previous installments. It's cheaper than a full-fledged product, it's more of an expansion than any sort of sequel, and for the money there is fun to be had. You could get a few hours out of this. But a couple hours in and I'm already feeling a little bit unenthusiastic about continuing. Ultimately it's fine. A little tiresome, pretty cynical, but entertaining in small doses. It's not something I'd recommend immediately rushing out to get, but if you want some co-op Nazi blasting, this'll do ya. But live services have come for Wolfenstein, and it makes me wonder what they'll come for next.